Hi, Doug Stworski for the U.S. Access Institute, LLC. Today we look at one specific element in our lesson series called Accessibility by the Element. That's where we take a quick look at the accessibility requirements and one specific element. We also do a comparison of the different ADA and state access codes and standards. We try to cover it from coast to coast. Remember, our goal is eliminating the confusion and access compliance. So check us out at www.usaccessinstitute.com. Okay, here we go. First, we start with the periodic table of accessible elements. It's not a real table in the access standard sense of things, but hey, we want to make access fun. Next, we look at section 502 from the 2010 ADA standards, and that section covers accessible parking space requirements. Then we'll drill down to section 502.3, which covers access aisles. Then specifically, we are going to examine the DOJ advisory note. It reads, accessible routes must connect parking spaces to accessible entrances. In parking facilities where accessible routes must cross vehicular traffic lights, marked crossings enhance pedestrian safety, particularly for people using wheelchairs and other mobility aids. Where possible, it is preferable that the accessible route not pass behind parked vehicles. I will state that part again. Where possible, it is preferable that the accessible route not pass behind parked vehicles. This advisory note is just a suggestion. It is not a requirement. Here's what we're talking about. The vehicle is parked in an accessible parking space with the required access aisle adjacent to it. We also see a marked crossing that connects to the access aisle and then passes by the accessible space on the right of the photo. If a car is parked in the space to the right, we see that a person in the left vehicle would have to travel behind a vehicle that is not their own. So let us explore what some of the specific state requirements have to say about this suggestion in the 2010 ADA standards. The 2010 Texas Accessibility Standards have exactly the same requirement as the ADA. No requirement, but a suggestion. The 2020 Minnesota Accessibility Code makes no mention to passing behind parked cars at all. Here's another example of a person required to travel behind a parked vehicle. Section 502.3 of the 2020 Florida Building Code Accessibility Provisions amends the verbiage. It states so that users are not compelled to walk or wheel behind parked vehicles except behind his or her own vehicle. So here they prohibit it. The 2022 California Building Code, Chapter 11B, agrees with the Florida Code. It states spaces and access aisles shall be designed so that persons using them are not required to travel behind parking spaces other than to pass behind the parking space in which they themselves are parked. There's no requirement mentioned in the 2020 Building Code of New York State, and no requirement in the ICC A117.1, the 2017 standard, and no requirement mentioned in the Fair Housing Amendments Act. As we have seen, the majority of the access standards that we looked at have no requirement concerning traveling behind vehicles other than your own. In this lesson, only California and Florida prohibit traveling behind vehicles other than their own. And with that, I want you to remember that here at the U.S. Access Institute, LLC, our goal is eliminating the confusion in access compliance. So check us out at www.usaccessinstitute.com.